when he uses the fancier language, he's talking about how sad he is. When he's using the vernacular language, suddenly he seems like a happier, more optimistic person. So this is where I'm starting to analyze that interpretation and explain my reasoning. All right, Washington evokes the image of the schoolhouse and the ginger cakes in order to convey how impossible his obstacles once seemed, and how slavery kept even the most basic of resources and pleasures out of reach. So again, in my interpretation, I identified the significance of, the ginger cakes and the schoolhouse as symbols. When I start to analyze that, I have to explain why they're significant, what they represent. All right, how much of a story should you retell in a literary analysis? Not, not much, right? You need to locate your reader in the context of the scene you're discussing, right? So some plot summary is necessary, but retelling the story is not an analysis. You want to include a brief summary, usually in the introduction, so that the body of the essay can be devoted to deeper analysis. Okay, one of the biggest kind of missteps that happens when people are writing literary analyses is that they veer into just summarizing the work rather than analyzing it. So it's very different to say what happened in a work versus what messages are being sent through a work. Okay, what does the format of a literary analysis look like? So as I said, in general, the introduction works to orient the reader, filling in the basic plot points, circumstances of the work, and then stating the essay's thesis, right? So, your background information in a literary analysis is going to be the brief summary. That's what you use for your background in a literary analysis. Then you have your open thesis that introduces kind of the main point of your essay. And then the body paragraph should be organized in whatever way makes sense for the content that you're writing about. So you have a fair amount of freedom with literary analysis in terms of what you choose to focus on. So if you decide to write an essay just talking about stylistic devices, right? So, you just want to talk about hyperboles and metaphors and foreshadowing, then you might devote each body paragraph to a different device. Right? So in one, you could talk about the metaphors, and one, you could talk about the similes, and one, you could talk about the oxymorons. If you've chosen a broader theme to explore, then each paragraph might be about a different way that the theme is conveyed, right? And I'm going to give you an example. So if you chose a theme, you would want to give examples from the text in each body paragraph to show why that is the theme. If you're examining different aspects of the text, so you're looking at symbols, themes, stylistic elements, all of those different aspects, then you would want each body paragraph to focus very clearly on each aspect in particular, right? So you might have one paragraph just about symbols, one just about themes, one just about the writer's style of writing, okay? The most important thing is that each body paragraph should have a really clear, intentional focal point, okay? So it should be very obvious what the focus of each body paragraph is. An analysis can become really confusing really fast if it jumps all over the place, because it's already kind of a complex, difficult task to analyze a text. So, you want to make sure that your ideas are as clearly organized as possible. Okay, so for example, in terms of what the body paragraphs might look like, if I were looking at the theme of escape in the Underground Railroad, I would want to think about how to organize that discussion. Okay, so maybe in my first body paragraph, I would discuss escape in terms of how it applies to different characters, right? So I could talk about how Ajari is defined by her unwillingness to try to escape. Mabel is defined by her desire to escape above all else. Cora is defined by an inherited ability to escape, right? So I would just talk about the theme of escape as it relates to the characters. In my second body paragraph, maybe I could discuss the ways in which literary devices are used to illustrate the theme of escape, right? So I could talk about, the garden as a kind of symbol for Cora's escape and inheritance. I could talk about the railroad as a reverse metaphor, a metaphor that is made into reality. I could talk about the symbolic nature of each state that Cora escapes to, right? So my second body paragraph would just be about those literary elements of escape. And then in my last paragraph, I might talk about the overall message that Whitehead is sending the reader about the nature of escape during slavery, right? So I might just kind of talk about what exactly he is trying to accomplish and what exactly he's trying to tell us about this theme of escape, right? And so again, there's like a million different ways that you could organize it. You just want to make sure that you have a plan for exactly how your discussion will be organized so that it doesn't veer off track. Remember that your analysis should rely heavily on textual evidence, right? So the reader needs concrete examples to support and illustrate all of your observations. In other words, use a lot of direct quotes. You know, if you're talking about something, you want to give an example of what you're talking about. Your reader really needs to be able to see your analysis in action in the text. And then in terms of ending it, you know, as always, you know, you want to restate your thesis and you want to universalize. But in ending a literary analysis in particular can be kind of daunting because you want the conclusion to convey a sense of completeness and closure, but also the sense of the lingering possibilities of the topic, right? Because analysis of literature is never really over, right? Because there's new revelations and discoveries that can arise when every time we reread something, you know? So, you know, I might read the Underground Railroad and discover a slew of new symbols that I never noticed before. I might, you know, we might have a class discussion and somebody brings up, you know, a revelation about the book that never occurred to me, right? So an analysis is never really over because there's always more stuff to uncover. Okay, so the conclusion should speak to the text's larger meaning, its evolution, and the final paragraph should close it without completely closing it off, right? In other words, you don't want to seem like, and that's all there is to say about that, right? Because there's always more to say. So anyway, I can elaborate more on that. I can show you guys an example of an effective conclusion that does this, kind of closes the chapter on the analysis without closing the book, so to speak. But again, this is just an overview. We will definitely discuss this more in depth at a later time. Okay.